Okay, right away up next, we're going to go into our next speaker. So, in a moment, I'll bring to the stage Navyata Bawa, who is working as a developer advocate for Meta, focused on AR and VR in MetaQuest and open source programs. So, I will welcome to the stage Navyata. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I'll tell everyone a little bit more about you. So prior to working with Meta, Navyata worked as a software engineer at multiple different companies, having had a chance to work on various different fields of engineering and had a chance to really wear many hats over time, which I think is great. And I'm sure brings wonderful experience here across the board that we're going to be able to hear about. Importantly, Navyata has always been an advocate for women in tech and believes that diversity brings out the best of any project that one undertakes. During her free time, Navyata loves to go hiking, traveling, and exploring new places, which seems to be a lovely theme of so many of our speakers today. I think it's like we work hard on our computers and then we get outside in the nature. So today, Navyata is going to share with us some tips for fostering inclusivity in VR. And I'm excited to hear. The platform is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me here today. I'm super excited to discuss the ways in which we can foster inclusivity in VR and make our VR worlds more accessible and welcoming. So, let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Navyata, and I'm a developer advocate focusing on AR VR technologies within Meta. And I'm an advocate for learning, building community, and diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. So now let's go over the agenda really quick. We will discuss we will discuss the power of VR, what it really means to create for everyone, the impact of inclusion in VR, guidelines and best practices, and key takeaways. Now let's go to our first topic, the power of VR and what it really means to be in VR. VR has the capability to trick our minds into believing that we are in a different world altogether. It creates this concept of alternate reality. This virtual world gives our eyes and our brain enough visual and audio stimuli to believe that what we are seeing is in fact real. So even though it's not exactly real, VR has been able to make us feel that it is real, that what we do in VR is real, and what we see is real. And hence, what we feel as a result is real. This brings me to my next topic, which is feelings. It's the feeling of being present and being involved that makes all the difference when we are in VR. The feeling of fear, love, happiness, and sadness. In the words of Maureen Fan, the co founder and CEO of Baobab Studios, VR allows you to have the empathy of films, the agency of games, and the motivation of real life. That's what VR allows you to do, that no other medium is capable to do on their own. VR changes how we think. Well, at least it makes us realize how we think about things in general. Things we find exciting, things we feel about other people, things we feel about ourselves, things that we take for granted. It lets us experience what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. VR fills in that gap that no other technology is capable of, tapping into our brains and bringing out the empathy that makes us realize that the world is diverse and so are our needs and perspectives. VR has the capability of making us realize how life is for other people. People with disabilities, people who are a part of a minority group, or people with different life experiences and who are from different walks of life. Companies have also started tapping into this missing place in their diversity and inclusion training and have realized how VR gives you something that no other training is capable of. It makes you feel that you're there and that it's happening to you. And that's the basic feeling that is so unique to VR. And that makes you feel that you can actually feel what other people feel. And that's how we can incorporate inclusivity into our lives and realize what it means to be in someone else's shoes. Now that we've discussed what VR is capable of and how we have the power to do so much in VR, let's go to our next topic, which is the need to create for everyone. Not for an average person, not for a disabled person, not for any specific person, but everyone. But how do we do this? And even before that, what does it even mean to create for everyone? We can achieve this by making our VR worlds more empathetic, by realizing what it is to be someone else, live life like someone else, and be empathetic towards everyone. by making our VR worlds more empowering, giving our players the power to have authority over their experiences, to make them more confident, and to give them the sense of control that they need to feel empowered. By being more accepting to people, their beliefs, and their perspectives, we will make VR experiences more comfortable and welcoming for everyone. By making our VR worlds more inspiring, a world where people can be what they want to be, where they feel encouraged and inspired to interact and call this experience their safe space. We can create for everyone by being inclusive, by making experiences that are for everyone. And we can do all these things by just embracing the fact that everyone has different life experiences, different capabilities and disabilities, different comfort levels, and make something that is for everyone. When we put our headsets on, we forget what our limitations are and what we are not capable of. Instead, we make our users believe that they belong. Now that we've discussed what it means to create VR experiences that are for everyone, let's go to our next topic, which is the question of why do we need to be inclusive and what are the impacts of inclusion in VR? Why do we need to make experiences keeping all this in mind and not just make something for a regular user? And the reason is there is no such thing as a regular average user. When we include accessibility in our designs, we are creating experiences that are more usable not only for people who might have difficulties with things like mobility, perception, or cognition, we are creating experiences that are more usable for everyone. Inclusivity in VR is a vital part of how someone will play a game and whether they will feel like they're a part of it or not, and design VR apps that are more approachable by a larger audience. Now look at this image on the left, a photo with flowers of various colors in it. Now imagine seeing the same image from a colorblind person's point of view. Based on the type of colorblindness that they might have, the same image might look like this or this. Imagine how they deal with day to day challenges in a world where red means stop and green means go. How do they differentiate and decide whether to stop or go? If this person was tasked to pick a certain color from this grid, they would probably struggle and might even find this task very frustrating. To solve this problem, if we added a shape, pattern, or letter to these colored cubes, the person will still be able to identify these pieces correctly and be able to interact within our experience. There are an estimated 300 million people in the world with color vision deficiency. 1 in 12 men are colorblind. 1 in 200 women are colorblind. This means that if we don't make our applications accessible and inclusive, our experiences won't be playable by millions of potential players from all over the world. When rendering your hands in VR or using hand tracking for things like throwing, writing, drawing, and all of those interactions that you do without giving a second thought in the real world, keep in mind that people have different dominant hands, different hand sizes, shapes, and all of these factors play a huge role when it comes to making VR applications inclusive. Approximately 12% of the world is left handed. So, if we had an experience that expects our players to throw or catch in VR only with their right hand, it could be a very frustrating experience for these people all over the world who are left handed. Now that we've discussed why we need to be inclusive, let's go over some guidelines and best practices that we can keep in mind when designing inclusive VR experiences. The first topic I'd like to discuss is universal design. To be able to create applications that are welcoming to everyone, we have to make sure that throughout the design process, we are designing it so that we are able to meet the needs of our players, keeping their physical ability, gender, learning ability, etc. in mind, and how this affects the way that they might experience this game. This process is called universal design. The next topic I'd like to discuss is user experience. Don't design for an average user. For example, we shouldn't design our experience around a room of a fixed size that we feel an average user would have. We must also keep in mind that we are all individuals who have our own preferences, dressing styles, skin colors, body structures, and so much more. And it's very important when asking a user to represent themselves in VR that we give them the ability to express themselves accurately and in a way that represents them right. Realize that there are varying levels of disabilities and design accordingly. Design keeping people with limited mobility in mind, offering ways to use controllers to teleport or to turn, etc. Playtest with audio disabled or with a monochromatic filter to remove color. Irrespective of these settings, people should still be able to progress in your application. Font and text size are crucial when designing VR applications, especially those that rely on the user reading instructions on the screen, tutorials, or even captions. We must make sure that the text size is big enough for everyone to be able to read. We also don't want our fonts to be so stylized that it makes it difficult to understand what it reads. Another important topic to discuss is that tolerance for brightness and intense flashing varies from person to person and must be kept in mind when designing our VR applications. We should try to minimize the use of intense flashing. And if we have to use it for our gameplay, make sure that you add a warning message within the application so that the people are aware and they know what to expect. And finally, color blindness should always be kept in mind when designing VR applications. Color blindness affects all visual parts of your game. Integrate patterns or shape instead of only relying on colors to convey. For example, if you want to show a traffic signal, consider adding additional information such as shape or text. The next topic I'd like to discuss is controls and interactions. Giving the user an option to choose their dominant hand in your experience will make them feel more comfortable as they interact within your world. In game feedback is an important part of any experience. One very simple addition to controller feedback is haptic feedback, which can be used to warn the player, make them aware, validate their move, and so much more. A raycast really helps in determining which objects in your game are interactable and gives a better estimate of their position in the 360-degree space, assisting users who have difficulty with low visibility or players who have difficulty with gauging spatial depth or distance in the virtual world. By clearly conveying which buttons and triggers are expected to be used, you can make your players a lot more confident in your experience. You can even choose to render the controllers as shown. Hand tracking can remove the need to have a controller to interact with your objects in the experience, especially for people who have difficulty holding them. For people with difficulty hearing, hand tracking can even be used to communicate through sign language. Another way to eliminate the need to have controllers altogether can be voice input. People who have disabilities can use this as means of interaction, while others can benefit from it as an additional control channel. The next topic I'd like to discuss is movement and locomotion. It is very important when adding any movement in your VR application to recognize what causes VR sickness and how we can minimize it. Physical locomotion is a great ability in VR, but it shouldn't be the sole method of locomotion. So, locomotion is the ability of a player to navigate within your virtual world. The ability to customize settings is especially important to maximize accessibility and to minimize motion sickness when it comes to controller based locomotion in VR, accommodating the largest audience for your application. Teleportation provides a great option for people who might find it difficult to hold the controller long enough for joystick motion, or even people who might find smooth or continuous locomotion uncomfortable. You can even use an indirect locomotion like grabbing and pulling, which enables the user to manipulate the space around them, giving them a stronger sense of agency in the application. VR is all about 360-degree space, right? An ability for the player to be able to look around by turning. In VR, looking around just means turning your head, right? Turning using head tracking is something that we take for granted in VR. But for people with limited or no head movement capabilities, this is not easy. Using the joysticks to turn in VR are a great alternative. Provide these options to your players so that they can customize their experience based on their needs. Finally, here are some of the other ways in which we can enable comfort for our players. Implementing heavy vignetting when moving helps with VR locomotion sickness. Implementing real world physics, enabling users to modify step size, jump height, or even movement speed, and using hand tracking as a method for movement and locomotion. The next topic I'd like to discuss is audio, captions, and subtitles. With UI sounds, use audio to amplify the meaning of each UI element but make sure that your sound design is not audibly cluttered or confusing. Gameplay sounds, on the other hand, can vary based on when they are used and what the purpose is. Frequency range is important when you consider players with partial hearing loss, as they may not be able to hear sounds above a certain threshold. It's not uncommon for people to experience high frequency hearing loss. Provide your user with the audio options that allow them to customize volume levels for music, sound effects, dialogue, and voice chat. And finally, captions and subtitles are essential tools that assist a wide set of audience, from those who are experiencing hearing loss to those who speak different languages to just general users who prefer to read rather than listen. If you have an application that players can play completely without any audio and just using captions, you have created accessible subtitles. And the last topic I'd like to discuss is virtual reality checks or VRCs. At Reality Labs, it is everyone's responsibility to keep accessibility, inclusivity, and diversity in mind when designing and supporting applications on our platform. We want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable and welcomed in the experiences that our developers make. To help with this, we launched the Accessibility VRCs or virtual reality checks. VRCs help us make sure that the applications are playable by broader audiences, regardless of the affordances that may have, and applications must be checked against these before they can be released on the store. These accessibility VRCs help us check for things like color blindness settings, handedness settings, locomotion settings, and many more to make sure that we are laying the foundation of making VR applications more accessible and inclusive for everyone. Now that we've gone over the various guidelines and best practices that we can keep in mind to make our VR apps more inclusive, let's go over some key takeaways. Diversity is not an option. It might be challenging to fully imagine how life is for people who are different from us. In order to make experiences that are welcoming or even playable for everyone, playtesting our VR application with a variety of people from various different backgrounds and perspectives is vital. Build diversity from within, not just in the users and playtesters, but also among the developers. Only then will we be able to design applications that accurately represent and accommodate for a large audience by learning from these diverse lived experiences. Inclusivity is a part of the development process, without which the application is not complete. To make sure that we fully understand our audience, we need to be in their position and experience the world like they do before we design our VR applications. Rather than taking inclusion as a feature or something that's an add on, center your experiences around inclusivity from the very beginning. Customization is the key. One of the most important facets of creating accessible VR is to make sure that people have the agency to choose how they want to interact with your application. Throughout this presentation, we went through ways in which we can bring this agency into our application design through user interface, display settings, locomotion settings, and so much more. It might feel almost impossible to know the preferences of each and every person, but by providing the choice to the player to change these settings, we give our player the sense of belonging by just letting them personalize their interactions in the application to their needs. And finally, keep universal design in mind. Design your VR applications so they not only benefit people with disabilities or limited capabilities, but also prove to be beneficial to everyone who uses the application. Keep in mind that VR is still new, and our players are still trying to figure out how the mechanics work, how to walk or move in VR, or even just plain exist in this new unknown space. Any design decision that we make that can make their experience more comfortable will help make our VR applications more inclusive. There is no one size fits all when it comes to building inclusive applications. But by fostering inclusivity in our VR applications, we are creating experiences that are more enjoyable and welcoming for everyone. The first step in designing for inclusion is to identify exclusion. VR is still new, and we are still in the process of incorporating inclusivity and accessibility into all VR applications. There are always new challenges, and to solve them, we need to educate ourselves and others and collaborate to work together towards a common goal of having a more inclusive VR world for everyone. Together, we can foster an empathetic approach to creating VR experiences that consider the perspectives of all users and create powerful, impactful, and more meaningful experiences for everyone. Thank you so much for all your time. And if you'd like to remain in touch, please find me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear from all of you.
Navyata, thank you so much for being with us here today. How does it feel to have your presentation done now?
Oh, it feels great. I hope it was useful for everyone.
I think it was. We have a lot of people chatting saying, I love that in the chat, and just general kind of supportive comments of what you were sharing with us here today. So thank you again for being here, Navyata, and have a great rest of your Women Tech Global Conference.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.